Namaskar. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great pleasure to welcome you all to this special occasion. Today, we gather to celebrate the launch of a remarkable book, The Sherpa Trail, Stories from Darjeeling and Beyond. The book promises to take us on an insightful journey through the lives of the Sherpa community in the Himalaya in general and Darjeeling to be more specific. I have the honor to introduce the other authors to you this evening. Allow me to introduce our distinguished authors. First, we have Nandini Purandare, an esteemed writer, editor. Nandini is renowned for her unwavering dedication to documenting and preserving the rich heritage of the Himalayan region. As the honorary editor of the prestigious Himalayan Journal and the current president of the Himalayan Club, she has consistently provided a platform for stories that delve deep into the cultural and natural landscapes of the Himalayas. Moving on to Deepa. Deepa Balsavar is a gifted writer and illustrator whose passion for storytelling knows no bounds. Deepa's work often shines a light on marginalized communities, and her keen eye for detail and profound empathy resonate throughout her narratives. Together, they have created a compelling and heartfelt tribute to the Sherpa people. Deepa teaches communication design at the IIT Bombay and was a core team member of the Avehi Abacus project for over 2 decades. Now, a few words about the book. The Sherpa Trail, Stories from Darjeeling and Beyond, as it is called, is, according to me, is more than just a book. It is a heartfelt tribute to the Sherpa community of the Himalaya. Through their meticulous research and engaging storytelling, Nandini and Deepa have brought to life the stories of resilience, cultural richness, and the indomitable spirit of the Sherpa. This book highlights their invaluable contributions to mountaineering and offers a deeper understanding of their heritage. To me, the significance of this book cannot be overstated. It provides a comprehensive and empathetic portrayal of the Sherpa people, moving beyond stereotypes to present a nuanced and respectful account of their lives. Deepa and Nandini offer readers an opportunity to appreciate not only the Sherpa's historical contributions, but also the contemporary challenges they face. I will now request Nandini and Deepa to take turn to read selected pieces from their work.
Firstly, thank you all so much for being here today. Coming to Calcutta and particularly the Oxford Bookstore is very, very special to us. We started going to Darjeeling in 2012. That was the first year we started going there. And we returned every year, sometimes twice, sometimes thrice, for 15 days, for 1 month, for a week at times, whenever we could get away from Bombay to meet with Sherpas, particularly the climbing Sherpas in Darjeeling. And in between, we met people who worked with the Sherpas, we met with other climbers, and we had a wonderful stay in Kolkata, where we spoke to many of the climbers in this city and spent many hours doing research in the Amrita Bazar Patrika archives to look up contemporary records of climbing during the Everest era and just before it as well. This book is really for us. I mean, we didn't set out to do it as great academicians. For us, it was a curiosity about Sherpas that turned into a friendship and then a passion and a feeling that this is something that we had to do. Our last interviews with the Sherpas was in 2019. After that, COVID came and we got down to transcribing the over 150 interviews that we had collected, putting together all the research work that we had done, and trying to make sense of these pages and pages and pages of information that we had into something manageable that we felt not only climbers but also armchair adventurers would enjoy. So this is our offering. This is our homage, as it were, to the Sherpas of Darjeeling, but always with the intention of being as honest as possible. Certainly, we figure in the book because we're interpreting what is being said. We are also spending time with them, but the idea was to let the voices and the stories of Sherpas come through in their own words. We'd like to read a couple of pieces at the outset, and for that, I'll ask Nandini to start first.
Thank you, Deepa. Thank you, Anindya, for that wonderful introduction. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge many of our friends from the days of our research are here. Mr. Das, who was the curator of the Himalayan Mountaineering Institute Museum, he helped us with old photographs and archival material. Mrs. Chatterjee, who's here, we are very moved that you're here. She lived many years of her life, grew up in Darjeeling, and her husband was was he the dean or was he master?
Yeah, at St. Paul's.
At St. Paul's. And St. Paul's is part of our story, really, because so many of our Sherpa children studied there, and so many, Pem Tenzing's daughter was a matron there. So thank you for being here. And I'd like to mention that we have Dan Amgyal, the great tiger medalist, very, very historic mountaineer, and Gyalzen Mikchan, their grandchildren are here. Thank you. Please identify yourself. It's really lovely to have you. And Dr. Rupak Bhattacharya, Anindya, thank you. Manikda. Oh yes, thank you very much. Yeah. Okay. Anindya says now read. So I'm going to read a short kind of an introduction to how the people started coming to Darjeeling back in the day, when the British established it as a hill station, as a place for recovering soldiers. So people started coming for employment. The immigration happened. While the Britishers flocked to enjoy everything these mountain retreats, including Darjeeling, offered, communities of immigrants continued flocking in for what the Britishers had to offer: employment. One such immigrant was Tenzing Norgay, who came to Darjeeling from Tibet as a boy with his father in the early 1880s to sell musk in Darjeeling. On the return journey, they were robbed, so they turned back to Darjeeling and walked the 50-odd kilometer long Falun track that was then being made a spectacular trekking route with views of 4 of the 8,000-meter giants, Everest, Kangchenjunga, Makalu and Lhotse. They became useful as interpreters and settled in Darjeeling. Wangdi went on to become a Sardar, a leader of porters on expedition. Joan Townend was back in those days was one of the first not Indian, she was very British, but she was the first lady secretary of the Himalayan Club based in Calcutta. And she really started recognizing these people and trying to keep records of their achievements. Yes.
And after Joan Townend, we have the first female women president of the Himalayan Club. That's also historic. Sorry to interrupt.
Joan Townend, who was to have a close association with the Sherpas and Bhutias of Darjeeling in the 1930s and 1940s, met Wangdi and wrote his story in an article for the Himalayan Journal in 1947. Wangdi told Townend that the first Sherpas came to Darjeeling in about 1902 or 1903. They came to trade and finding that they could earn good wages, they stayed through the summer season. One of them was called Norbu Jhao, the bearded man. This fact would be likely to fix itself in the memory as it was rare to see anyone with Tibetan blood with a beard. Another Sherpa who came to Darjeeling was named Choktuk. When Norbu Jhao and Choktuk returned to Solukhumbu in Nepal, the people left their work and ran from their fields to see these two grandly dressed strangers. Their account of Darjeeling inspired several of their fellow countrymen to follow their example. The following year, the original two plus 6 others journeyed to Darjeeling to work as labourers and rickshaw pullers. Once the Sherpa migration from Solukhumbu started, the trickle became a flood. Young men and women, hearing of employment, ran away from home. Travelling solo or in small groups, they would set out with nothing but the clothes on their backs and a handful of sampa. Sampa is this glutinous kind of barley that they make porridge out of, to eat on the way. They crossed high passes, their feet wrapped in straw and covered in bags. The early migrants would have passed through dense forests, remote valleys, moving at altitudes between 600 and 3,500 meters. There would have been no serais for them to halt at. Even Sherpa villages were few and far between, situated only on the higher ridges. How did they know where to go? They followed the sun, say older Sherpas in Darjeeling. They knew that Darjeeling was in the east, so they travelled in that direction, walking for days and days. In Darjeeling, they would seek out the communities they knew. Everyone knew an uncle or a clan brother who would give them shelter until they could find a small room of their own. The Sherpas to Tungsung, the Bhutias to the Bhutia Basti, the Sikkimese Bhutias to Geen, where the Lepchas had a settlement. These settlements in Darjeeling were out of sight of the British areas, facing the valleys on forested, unlit slopes teeming with wildlife. At night, the women would wait in groups to scuttle through the darkness, and even the men avoided going home alone. Newcomers to Darjeeling did the jobs that were identified with their communities. Dorji Latu told us that the early settlers brought their traditional occupations with them. There were communities of meat sellers called the Shing Savas, traditional bakers called Yolmos, and skilled paper makers called Kagates. They belonged to small tribes that soon integrated into the larger groupings of Sherpas and Bhutias. The ethnic Bhutias and Sherpas themselves were load carriers of different kinds, pulling rickshaws, carrying the chair-like dandies, and portering luggage and heavy loads. This is way before they were discovered as the best men to carry loads of mountains. Thank you.
So that was a piece about how the very first Sherpas came and settled down in Darjeeling. Almost the coming together of the different people and the different settlements in Darjeeling. There is much more of it in the book. But I would like to read a piece now in the early days of mountaineering, when it had been established that the Sherpas and the Bhutias were the hardiest people and the most preferred climbers for the expeditions, the best load carriers. So we're talking about a typical expedition, and I'm talking about an expedition, say, in the from the 20s onwards. The very first reconnaissance of expedition to Everest was in 1921, and the first expedition to Everest was in 1922, followed by 24, and then in 33, 35. So this is what would have happened in on one of those typical recruitment meetings. On the day of interviews and hiring, the recruiters would appear on the veranda of the Planters Club, what they call the quarter deck, in the center of the town, and the hopefuls gathered below. Many would be from Darjeeling, but there would be others from Gombu who had travelled the 10 days to Darjeeling as quickly as they could. Those who had been on expeditions before would clutch in their hands the chits provided by previous expedition leaders. These were letters of recommendation, sometimes consisting of just a line or two stating that the bearer of the paper had been on such and such an expedition and proved satisfactory, or had shown himself to be good at higher altitudes when kept in tight control, or was reliable until he got his hands on drink, to which he was not averse. Though the porters could not read what was written, each paper nonetheless represented communication from one Sahib to another and carried the promise of employment. Aspiring porters without chits depended on good luck and their ability to impress with their keenness alone. Old hands often picked up a smattering of words in different languages, and above the din of Nepali and Sherpa might be heard a few words of English, or perhaps a ya learned from the Bavarians. Hugh Rutledge wrote in An Attack on Everest, "Yet you can size up a man pretty well, however imperfect your means of communication. Previous experience had shown that the big muscular man who is capable of great feats of strength, usually of short duration at moderate altitudes, is apt to fail on the high mountains. He has to carry too much top hamper in the shape of his own burly person, and the additional load is his undoing. We went out for the wiry, active, clean-bred type, reasonably intelligent and with the indefinable stamp of quality, as a horse dealer would say." Please notice the comparison. For this particular expedition, once the men were selected, they were sent to hospital to be medically examined and relieved of internal parasites. We used to visit the men in hospital, where there was much merriment over our attempts to re-identify recruits last seen in their grubby working clothes. Each man had had a bath and was clothed for the first time in his life in beautiful blue and white striped pajamas. It was a wonderful transformation, and they were delighted by the admiration of their friends. It is unlikely that most expeditions displayed such concern about their porters' health, albeit to save themselves aggravation later on. In many cases, selection would be left to a local British agent or to a sardar who appointed men they knew. Sometimes the first time that most members on an expedition would see their porters would be at the start of the expedition itself. Once selections had been made, the porters would help in the packing and weighing of loads. Advances on salary would be given so that families were looked after while the men were away. Affairs would be put in order, and finally one last and important ceremony would take place. The Sherpas would seek the blessings of the head lamas of the nearby monasteries. And when everything was in order, the porters in Tumsung would have a night-long party. Dorji Latu shared with us his memories of the night before a typical expedition. When we came down to Darjeeling, we lived below Ajiba's house. Ajiba was a very prominent porter in the 1940s and 50s. We had one room. At one side was the cooking area, another side the altar, and one bed. We all slept on that one bed. There was Latu and 3 other siblings and his mother, so there were 5 of them on that one bed. My mother was Ajiba's cousin. When the men were to leave on expeditions the next morning, the whole night there would be a marathon Sherpa dance with boots on, mountain boots. In those days there were clinkers, and when they danced up there, all the dust would fall down on our faces. We were kids then, 6 or 7 years old, and had just come from Tibet. We would cover our faces, and in the morning it was as if there had been a snowfall, actually a dust fall. Early in the morning, before we got up, the men would be gone. They didn't sleep all night. So this is an account of a night before an expedition. There are a few other pieces that we've selected, but we will perhaps come back to them later. This is a little bit of a jhalak of the early days in Darjeeling and early expeditions.
That's very beautiful.
But we will come back later on if there is time and if there is any
We have time.
interest.
So, I will now invite Dr. Rupa Bhattacharya to say something.
Good evening, everybody. I'm a little speechless, and what I say will go helter-skelter because I'm quite overwhelmed. It's not often that you read a book and you get to meet the authors. A fan meeting somebody at such short notice. I've just finished the book a few days ago, and it's indeed a pleasure and a privilege to meet both the authors tonight. I'm also overwhelmed because my memories of HMI come back to me with Mr. Thendu here. His father was my instructor at HMI, and I'm really overwhelmed today. We need to talk about the book, which is what we are here for today. From Tumsung to Park Street is a very short journey. You start early in the morning from Tumsung and you'll be here for tea in the evening. But for the authors, it has been a very long journey in terms of time taken and the route that they have covered. From Tumsung, they have gone all the way to North Pole and then back to Kangchenjunga Monastery and the South Pole, and they have taken in K2 and Kangchenjunga and a lot of other peaks in between. But in this long route, and they have then returned back to Bombay, and now we have the book. During this long journey, one thing that comes through in the book is that they are the gatherer of stories. Stories is what keeps us alive through generations. They have been the gatherer of these stories, and they have put it down in a book. And it is a very important book in the sense that this is part of the alternative history that we have been talking about in historical studies for quite a few years now. This is a subaltern study where the underprivileged, those that have not been talked about so long, are now again finding their voices. And these voices are very important to understand, to get the right perspective about that entire generation of people. So it's a very important book, as Anindra said. There's a lot of empathy behind the book. There is no hagiography. There is no hero worship. You can read the hero worship in the background, but there are a lot of empathetic, humdrum stories in it about their day-to-day lives, which brings these men and women who have long passed away back in flesh and blood for those of us who have not seen them in life. Why is it also more important is something that is not part in the book, but I think it is necessary to tell. The Sherpas, as we all know, are people from the east of Tibet who migrated. That was their first migration. They came to the Solukhumbu, and they had the second migration. Some of them went to Kathmandu, and some of them came to Darjeeling. This book talks about those that came to Darjeeling. And they earned a reputation in a very short while as people who were very good at high altitudes. What was the corollary? Sort of what happened then was that the Sherpa got labeled. And what was the label? A very, very endearing label. That they were hardworking, they were smiling. But above all, other than that, they had very good lungs and heart at high altitude functioning. They were reliable and dependable. So what happened? The common noun Sherpa, the common noun about a group of people who came from Tibet, became an adjective Sherpa to describe either things or services which are dependable and reliable. So which adjective commodified the Sherpa. They became a commodity. And I have looked this up on my studies of the Sherpas. You have motorcycles, you have airplane manufacturers, you have Himalayan salt, you have the brewery industry, you have AI applications, internet applications, iPad applications. They are all called Sherpas. So the noun suddenly became a commodity and adjective.
G Summit, they are also called Sherpas. The part of the G20 Summit.
Yes, I will also add that. High officials, CEOs in the corporate sector, and personal assistants of ministers, etc., who are extremely dependable and reliable and do very good job, are also called Sherpas. So, somebody who is lazy and who likes his fish and rice should be called a Bengali. Is, I think, doing a disservice to the Bengalis. And I think it's doing a disservice to the Sherpas in making them a commodity and an adjective. They are a noun. Later, they came back to becoming from a common noun to a proper noun, and the Sherpas got their individual identities. We heard of a Tenzing and an Ajiba, Ngalsin Nikichen, and a Ganamgia. And these authors have brought that back into the common parlance again. They are not adjectives. They are common nouns and proper nouns. And the authors have given them a voice, a very empathetic voice, a very learned voice, a very deeply studied voice. So, it is very important to realize that these subaltern studies, these marginalized people who have been given a voice again, be a notice to future authors, future publishers and editors, and more so for the reader. They should be looking out for such books. Mountaineering books, what we have always read is about a mountain and a peak, a summit, somebody going up and coming down or maybe not coming down, and how he went up and how he came down. There is more to mountaineering than just a summit and how you went up and how you came down. The more to what there is in mountaineering is what is there in this book. And in the types of these books, the more the merrier. And we are glad we have this book now. It should be a compulsory addition to any sensible library on mountaineering books. And I am deeply grateful to both the authors for giving us this book. Thank you so much, both of you.
Thank you, Deepa. I will now request Agya Thendu to say a few words. Please.
Hearty good evening, and it's a privilege, and I'd like to thank the authors and Dr. Deepa for making this possible. So in just a few days that I got a WhatsApp text from him. So he told me his experience about mountaineering institute in Darjeeling and his acquaintance with my father. And since I was posted here, I've been here for the last 6 years now in Calcutta. So it was luck and destiny, I think, that brought us together. And reading a few experts from this book, from the authors, like I think it touches the heart and soul. You bring it out and very beautifully. And it reminds me of my father telling the same stories, like what he narrated from Siddhartha Natu. So he used to tell the same stories. They work hard but party harder. That was it. So it's really nice being among such a nice gathering and momentous occasion. And I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, I now have a few questions for the authors.
Present you a copy of the book.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What I would like to do for my teacher is to give you this card.
Are you a Sherpa?
Yes.
Yeah, he is. He's Nanamgia's grandson.
So he is
Gyansen grandson, brothers. So let me just to those who this when the Himalayan Mountaineering Institute was set up in 1954, the first instructors there was Tenzing Norgay, who was the director of climbing, yes, and the instructors under him, there was Nawang Gombu, there was Nawang Gombu, there was Tharke, there was Norbu, and there were Da Namgyal and Gyaltsen Mikchen, who were brothers. All these first instructors were absolutely phenomenal climbers who had been on so many expeditions. And at that time, there weren't proper records of the expeditions that they had all been on. But they were among the greats. So to have the grandsons of two of the very first instructors at HMI in those halcyon days of the HMI is indeed a privilege and a very humbling experience. Thank you.
Incidentally, Tenzing Norgay scaled the heights with Edmund Hillary.
Yes.
We'll come back to our audience when you can interact. I have some questions for the authors now. First question to Nandini. Nandini, could you share with us what inspired you in the first place to write this book and focus on the Sherpa community of Darjeeling and Beyond?
Inspiration came later. First was just knowledge. Most of us, who in their consciousness would think of one community in one small town in India, which is such a large country? So first, I have to thank most of you here may know the name Harish Kapadia. He is a great explorer and mountaineer and a teller of stories, lots of stories. He and the earlier editor of the Himalayan Journal. So he and I were on a trek together in Arunachal Pradesh, and he told me a story which was a little very funny and definitely a story that got my attention. You read it in the book. It's about Pasang Dawa Lama. Remember the name when you read it. And he said, there are many of these stories and nobody has written them down because there is this whole community in Darjeeling of people who have no letters. They have no education. Their stories are told to their families, to their children, if at all. Because like somebody told us, does your father who's an engineer come home and tell you what happened at work? It doesn't happen like that. These guys went to climb. They didn't come back saying, oh, this happened, that happened. But as history gets created, these guys collected these stories. They got passed down from one generation to another. We came into the picture a little late. If we had gone in 10 years earlier, I assure you this book would have been 10 times better than it is today, because we got to know about this community when lots of the great people had gone. So we didn't get the story from them, but their children, their grandchildren, their nieces, nephews, friends, sisters, brothers told us stories. And so that's how we got into we went for the wake of a very great Sherpa called Nawang Gombu. He had passed away 1 year before we went, and there was this long, very elaborate ceremony for the 1 year death anniversary, and we went there, invited ourselves, and we started going to their house every day, meeting different Sherpas in Darjeeling. And Deepa, me and another friend, 3 of us went and spent these 10 days in Darjeeling that first time, and we were completely addicted to getting more stories, and that's how our journey began.
That's really wonderful, fascinating. Deepa, as both a writer and an illustrator, how do you approach the storytelling of this book to ensure that the voices of the Sherpa people were authentically represented?
So I think that the first thing that we decided was that the stories that were being told to us were so compelling, and that it had to be in the Sherpa's own words, that we were merely recorders of what they were saying, that we were extremely aware of the fact that as two middle class Bombay English speaking women trying to record the stories of Nepali or Hindi speaking Sherpas in Darjeeling, we were constantly plagued with the questions of who are we and what right do we have to tell somebody else's stories. But we also realized that if we hadn't done it, then these stories would have gone untold completely. In the course of the writing of the book, there are about 12 Sherpas whom we've interviewed and who feature in the book who passed away. And as Nandini said, if we had gone there 10 years earlier or 15 years earlier, there would have been another 20 or so that we may have been able to meet. And so I think that was a conscious decision that we said, we will, of course our voice appears in the book, because how can it not? We're writing the book finally. But the first thing that we decided to do was that we would be honest. Honest in our recording of what was being said, scrupulously honest in our translation and transcribing of what was being said, and honest in trying to do justice to the stories that were being revealed to us. And that was our, in fact, our sort of lodestar or our path that we decided to take. As for the stories themselves, they were so compelling, they didn't need embellishment. They didn't need any extra additions or any extra things. The stories were there. Yeah. And there were so many more stories. A lot of them we did not include for various reasons. Yes.
So both of you have extensive experience now documenting the various aspects of the community. Now, what were some of the key challenges that you encountered while researching and writing the story?
So I'll tell you a few, and then if I forget some. There were quite a few challenges: distance, geography, language, time, money. All these were challenges that we faced, of course. But while actually, documenting these stories, we found it's not very easy to remember stories and facts. And what is fact and what is memory? Just to understand whether this is what he's saying is true, whether he's talking about using the right names, is he using the right dates, is she using the right heights? is that important, or is that her memory of what she remembers? Is that the important fact to communicate? So we kind of tilted towards the importance of memory. It may be wrong, some of the facts may be wrong. We did a lot of cross-checking. We tried to correct facts, but when we were recording, we decided that we need to take this memory further and put it down. So that was one of the challenges. Another was, how honest can you be? There are many insights that you get that might hurt people, that that we in fact are already facing a little bit of discontent about the way we portrayed Tenzing Norgay, who was such a great Sherpa. And if we were going to write another chapter on how great he was, then what will we add? We wanted to write about how people remembered him.
And how human he was finally.
How human he was. He was great, but he was a human being. And he had weaknesses and strengths of a human being. So that was the other thing. So these were a couple of challenges. Deepa, can you add to that?
Yeah. Then apart from that was of course the transcribing and the translation. When you have 150 interviews, then transcribing takes a very long time. Translation from another language, say whether it's Hindi or Nepali, which is then translated into Hindi and then translated into English, also takes time. Research takes a lot of time, and all these things were competing with our day jobs that we were doing in Bombay, with our families and with the other responsibilities that we had. We had no money. We worked on the basis of money that was donated by one friend who would give us a little bit, by somebody who loaned us a camera, by somebody else who would give us a lesson on how to use the camera and how to record information. Cox and Kings said, okay, we will sponsor your plane tickets, which was a great relief to us. So it was done on a shoestring. And therefore we couldn't go as often as we wanted to, or do it, and that's why part of the reason why it took so many years also to complete.
We had no grants. We were living in a small rented cottage in Darjeeling, walking to Tenzing every day, coming back, doing our own cooking, our own cleaning, our own work. So it was hard work. Yes.
How long did it take in total, from the start to the completion of the book?
Like she said, 2012 we started going to Darjeeling. We went there every year, sometimes twice, sometimes thrice a year, up to 2019.
And in between there, we went to Nagpur to meet Captain Kohli and several friends. We went to Dehradun to meet Gurdayal Singh and Nalini Jayal. We came to Kolkata and met all of you friends here. We went to Bangalore and we met Captain D.K. Kullar. Where else did we go? We went to Delhi. We went to Delhi where we interviewed Rita, Ommu and Yandu, Nawang Gombu's daughters. We went and Gul Kumar. So we went to all these places. We had several interviews with people in other countries, Zoom meetings with people in other countries. And in between we were also we acquired a library of books from where we did research and looked through archival papers and looked through archival things, because we were just constantly confronted with so much information that we needed to somehow understand first ourselves before we could put forward coherently so that other people could understand it.
Got it. That's wonderful. So, could you discuss any particular story that sort of stands out to you in this process of 8 years or 9 years?
Yeah, there are several. I mean, it's
Just
not
choose one.
easy.
Choose one.
So there's this young Sherpa in Darjeeling. His name is Mingma Hapshe. He still climbs. He has won the Garud also. and he told us a story many years ago before he recently did. There was this record that 1 month like 8,000 was in a month. So Neema talked about an accident that happened in the Himalaya. He talked about death, and he talked about how he was with a team, and the details are in the book, but his whole experience as a young boy climbing with the team and losing one member, or more than one member, I think, 2 members, he was so devastated by that experience, and the fact that he was so unable to save their lives, and that they would have had families. He was not married. He broke down, talking about how it should have been him rather than them. And
The thing is that, I think that, often when speaking about the Sherpas, it's spoken about their Buddhist attitude towards death and life, and how there's this whole acceptance of death as another part of life and all that. And that is the broad, stereotypical attitude, along with friendly, trustworthy, hardworking, smiling, all those things. It's part of the whole aura or the picture that is built up about Sherpas. But to talk to him and to see how deeply affected he was by that one incident, where for the next 4 or 5 years of his life, he started drinking extremely heavily because he couldn't get over the sense of responsibility. He was completely. And then how his brothers, he comes from a family of brothers where 4 of them are climbers. And they're all illustrious climbers. And with the help of with his brothers, he slowly started coming out of it again. Also because there's no alternative, right? You come and the climbing is the only thing you know how to do. It's the only work you can do. So what do? You finally have to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and say, okay, I have to continue. But that story, which is recounted in his own words about this, and he says that one of the climbers who caused the accident had not had any training before. And he starts off with saying, in climbing, I will not cheat you, but please don't cheat me. Don't tell me that you know how to climb when you don't know how to climb. And it is such a poignant and such a beautiful story. And that was the first time we had seen a Sherpa actually break down like that and talk to us about death.
We talked to many others about death also, but this is one really, and this Sherpa still climbs.
And right now he's won almost every award, and he's become one of the most famous climbing Sherpas in Darjeeling today.
That's wonderful. That's good. So this is my last question for today, then we'll have the audience to ask. So what do you hope readers to take away from you?
So we didn't set out with any great feeling that we're going to be doing this or we're going to be doing that with the book. We just felt that these stories were important, that the Sherpas are such an important part of climbing history that we wanted to record it and make the stories available. We were also very clear that we were not writing a sociological book or an academic book. We weren't doing a study in that sense. We were presenting stories. And therefore, it should be accessible to both climbers and to armchair adventurers and enthusiasts who could read about it, learn a little bit more about the Sherpas, and perhaps grow to have some of the admiration and some of the great sense of respect that we developed while we were meeting them.
And most of all, I feel this book is for the Sherpas. Really, we are currently looking for somebody to translate it into Nepali for us. and we'd like to make an audiobook as well, so people who are unable to even read can listen to the stories, because what is most important is to instill a sense of pride in the community about their fathers and grandfathers. It's more, it's embarrassing to say mera baap kuli tha, but if you can actually say my father was a great mountaineer, then I think our book is has achieved what
Yeah, that's
it's set
perfect.
out.
Because I grew up in my mountaineering career. If I look at the Indian Mountaineering Foundation journal, and you will see such and such expedition, Mr. A, Mr. B, C submitted with 5 Sherpas.
With 5 Sherpas.
So we hope this is one step towards changing that sort of a narrative.
Yeah.
You know, that
Absolutely.
I hope that changes. My personal climbing partner over the last 20 years has been Tenzing Sherpa, and then now I climb with Footing Your Luck, as it is called. Powerful. So now is the time for audience questions. Kindly ask specific and keep it respectful. Yeah.
Since it is a joint effort as writers, did both of you ever clash? Since it's a joint effort as writers, did both of you ever clash over priorities?
We didn't clash, but we talked, we discussed, we debated. We had, very, very impassioned discussions.
We didn't fight. But it wasn't ever about, having complete
We are still very good friends after 12 years of writing.
But also Nandini and I have been working together since the 1990s. So we have a very long history together, and in that sense we're like family. So like family we do fight, but we do know that ultimately we're both looking for the same thing.
We're on the same side.
Yeah. So it wasn't contentious enough.
I've written a book of short stories, and one of the stories is called Rock of the Mountain God.
Okay.
Sherpas were also part of the story. It is a story told by, I don't know whether you've heard of him, Pradeep Shahu.
Yes.
You've heard of him. He's now dead, isn't it?
Yes.
I recounted his entire story.
Chetna was there, yes. And Furba was there. And Devu was, Devraj was
I
there.
recorded his whole story in a short story.
Any next questions? Next, anyone? Any questions for Nandini and Deepa from the audience?
Hi, Nandini and Deepa. Yes. The thing is that when you say that Sherpas, they should be proud of their forefathers, I think it is also, it must have reduced, because you talk to those retired Sherpas and this now the climbing Sherpas. So what difference did you find in the outlook towards their service towards the climbs when they talk about that? And did you find any differences?
Of course. Earlier Sherpas were very much more servile, very, very my baap kind of attitude. While today's Sherpas in Darjeeling and more so in Nepal are equal partners. They take decisions with the leaders. They sit on and eat the same food. They expect to be treated as equals. So there is definitely more equality and more assertion on the decisions of the teams than there ever was before.
Yeah, so there is one quote in the book where it says that today if one of our Alubari Sherpas says, we don't go, then you don't go. They never had the power earlier in the 40s and 50s and 30s and all that to ever voice something like that. But today if a Sherpa says, we're not going to go up, for whatever reason, the weather is not good, we don't have enough rope, the conditions are not good, then they are listened to. So there is,
And the older Sherpas were followers. They followed the Sahabs. While the current Sherpas are the route makers. They make the route for the Tsars.
Is it the same dedication or the same love for the mountain? Do you find that one? That's my actual question was. The same kind of love or dedication?
It's hard to say, Vibhu, that whether there is that same dedication. Definitely, they're more business-like. They're expecting better returns for their labor. So maybe they come across as more rough and I don't know whether there was a love for the mountains in those days also, because Sherpas always climbed to make a living. They did not climb for pleasure. So it wasn't about love for the mountains or love for the profession. They just needed to earn money to run their homes.
And in fact, I think that's something that was common to the earlier Sherpas and to the ones who are climbing now, is the statement that we're climbing so that our children don't have to. That is something that we heard, whether it is a Purba today or a Mingma Akshay or a Pasang Putar, or whether it was a Dorji Latu or Nawang Gombu. All of them have expressed this in more or less the same words, that we are doing this so that tomorrow our children don't have to do it.
So what do you think about the future of this the profession of that? If their children will not be doing that, the children are not doing. So is that?
Among the older Sherpas, the ones who came from solo Kumbu already, the ones who are still in the business are running trekking companies. There's nobody within the older Sherpas who are actually climbing, right? Yeah, among the newer guys in Alubari, we were told very categorically, in 15-20 years, you won't see any more climbers here. Because our children will be educated.
Have you commented?
Yes, it's covered.
That's good.
Yeah.
Any plans to transcribe the book into a documentary? Because
No plans. If somebody wants to make a documentary, we have a lot of video footage. We have audio recordings of all these interviews. So we'd be happy to, but we don't have the capacity to.
Nor do we have the skill
or the, yeah.
Any more questions? I just want to add, or rather ask you something. What that said about Sherpas becoming more assertive of taking decisions on the mountain.
Yes.
To go up or to come down or whatever, to stay put. Is it because when they were climbing with the Sahibs, they relied on the decision making of the Sahibs and they knew that they are capable of doing and taking a decision? And the role reversal, the Sahibs, so-called Sahibs that they go with now, are not as good at taking mountaineering decisions, and those decisions should be taken for them. Because the Sahibs earlier would open the route. Now the Sahibs of these days are unable to open their own routes.
Yeah. Yes, that's true. And also, if you see the Alubari guys now, they are constantly upgrading their skills. They are learning the craft. They're not load bearers. None of them will be called load bearers. They have altitude friends. They're Sherpas, but they're not load bearers anymore.
Good for them.
Yes, absolutely.
Any more questions?
Today's conversation has interested you enough to buy our book.
Yeah, so I was going to come to that. So Nandini and Deepa are here and they will be available to sign books. You can just buy downstairs. They have kept it next to the counter so that you don't have to go and look for it.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure. Just so after we finish this, they will be here for a while and they can sign the books. Nilanjan, please.
It would be interesting to note the significance of the title of it. It means the Sherpa Trail. Would you amplify it? What is the trail?
Okay, so when we first wrote the book, we had called it head strap. Head strap being the strap that is associated with the carrying of loads, particularly within the mountain communities. And we thought that that was the right title for it. And in fact, the book was first taken up by the Mountaineers Books, which is a Seattle-based company publishing house, and the international edition is called Extra. But we were very keen when we spoke to the publishers in America. We said we insist that you have an Indian partner, because we want our book to be available in our country and not at American prices. So you have to have an Indian publisher, and we want you to be in partnership with somebody to whom you will sell the rights for the subcontinent. And that's how Rowley Books came into the picture. They were always interested, and therefore they decided that they would take it up. But on two conditions. One is they said that they wanted to change the cover, which is fine, and it's often done in different territories. And they also wanted to change the title because they felt that that title would not work. And we went back and forth over several days and several ideas. And then finally they felt that they would like to go with Sherpa Trail. And that is where this was a Sherpa Trail. Frankly, even I am not sure whether it talks about the trail that we are going towards the mountains or the trail coming
We are
from the
following the
mountains.
Sherpa Trail.
But we are following the Sherpa Trail. We are following their trail from Solukhumbu, from Tham, from Tibet to Solukhumbu, and then over the passes to Darjeeling, and that is the trail that we are following.
And
So
their lives.
that is
They kind of
yeah,
followed their lives.
yeah. So that is our interpretation of the Sherpa Trail.
How long did it
Thank
take
you.
to complete the book?
2012 we started, we completed in
2020 we gave the manuscript in 2020.
8 years. 8 years.
21.
9 years.
10 years.
10 years.
No, let's finish. Yeah, wind up.
First.
I would like to thank the audience very much, each and everyone coming out. I would like to thank Nandini and Deepa. Like I said, they are available for signing their books. The books are available downstairs. Thank you so much. Thank you.